Hi, and thank you for joining us for this episode of the State of Leadership, Simple and Beyond. That is Robert Hilliard. I am Whitney Wiley, and we are here on Thursdays talking all things leadership, 3 p.m. Eastern, 12 noon Pacific. And it's been a couple of weeks. How have you been, Robert?
I've been good. I've been good. Basketball season has officially started, and I watched my team get trounced by the
Yay!
Celtics. Yeah, well, not yay to that, right? But so I'm in sports heaven right now.
So, and we're at that time of the year that week or so where all the sports are happening at once. You've got football, baseball, basketball, college, all the stuff going on. So there may be some leadership lessons that come out of what's happening, and if so, we will bring. I'm sure there are. I'm sure there are
Always,
some
always.
things. Some things have been happening. um I was, one of these weeks we'll talk about. I had jury duty. One of the reasons that we were away for the past couple of weeks, I've been traveling, you've been traveling, doing things. So we are back, and we'll be here certainly for a couple of weeks, and then we've got the holidays coming up. We'll figure that out when the time comes. But I one of the things I know I want to explore as a topic is jury duty and
Hmm.
some of the leadership lessons that can come out of that. In particular, here in California, and I know it's done in different ways all around the country, we've had a change in the way we do jury duty here. And the really interesting part of that is and I'm sure there have been other evolutions, but when I was lobbying, I was actually part of the effort to change from the like the original way we did jury duty to what we called one day, one trial. And then they've made some tweaks since then. And so um, we'll circle back around to that and talk about that at some point. But
Excellent.
today we are going to talk about micromanaging. And I would say this: if you watch the show and you follow the philosophy that we espouse here on the state of leadership, you wouldn't be a micromanager. So we're going to talk about what do you need to explore in terms of whether or not you're micromanaging. And one of the things that comes up, and I have these conversations with my clients frequently, and actually had a conversation with a client just this week in her session, and she was saying she didn't want to micromanage. And there's a difference between micromanaging and communicating, right? And being clear. We certainly espouse clear communication, frequent, clear communication, holding people accountable. That is not the same thing as micromanaging. Um, but what we're going to talk about are some of the reasons that people micromanage. And this was inspired from an infographic that I came across or popped up on my timeline um, from Howie Chan, I believe his name is. And I thought the infographic was really sort of insightful, right? And I'll show it in just a minute. But Robert, any opening thoughts here?
No, I'm curious and excited to explore this topic because this is something, like you said, we talk about all the time on the show, and there are sometimes when micromanaging is okay, but it's rare. And so I always say that, like many skills that we talk about here, if you think about micromanaging as a spice, call it pepper. It can make your food taste good, but if you put it all over your food and it's the only spice you use, your food will be inedible. So always have to remember that if you're a micromanager, if you catch yourself, you need to back off. because it's only okay in very specific situations.
Absolutely. And so with that, I'm going to pop up the infographic, and I'm going to, for the most part, leave the infographic up on the screen while we're talking so that as you are watching and listening, you can see what we're talking about. Um, and the other interesting thing that happened this week, as I pop this up, the other interesting thing that happened this week was I was on a webinar for I guess they turn out to be a marketing firm, and their clients are law firms and helping law firms to grow and scale. And so I have clients that are going through that. So I was interested in knowing what they were talking about. And they spent some time talking about the hiring process when a law firm, and in reality, it doesn't matter, law firm, any kind of company, right? When you get to that point as a, let's say, a startup, and you get beyond you and a virtual assistant or some other, a lower level employee or two, right? When you start to really expand and scale, paying attention to the quality of the person that you hire. And they talked about A players on the team as opposed to C players, right? He didn't mention B players at all. So I guess we go from A to C. So you have A players and you have C players. A players will tend, right, they're your high performers, they're your high pos, and they're going to be people that for the most part, after a particular point, and this is to Robert's point, there are times when micromanaging is necessary. Certainly, new employees, getting people started up and running and making sure that they know their job, that you may be more hands on with them than you need to be after some period of time. But for the most part, once they've had some time on the job, A players are not employees that you're going to need to micromanage. And if you do, you're likely to lose them. Whereas C players would more likely be those employees that you would need to micromanage. And the question becomes, uh, is that how you want to spend your time and energy? Right? When we talk at it, the concept of simple is self-awareness, intentionality, mastery, purposefulness, leverage, and energy. Do you want to spend your energy, and is that the best use of your time? Right? And if you are running whether it's a whole company or department, the question that you have to continuously be asking is, what is the best use of your time? And if you could be doing a higher level, a higher function, that's where your time and energy should be spent. Because if you're doing something that someone else could be doing, right, then what do they need you for?
Right. Right. But there are some leaders who think that micromanaging is the most efficient way to get their team to perform. And that's unfortunate because there are a lot of other ways that they could be spending their time, a lot of other leadership skills they could be using, but they tend to think that this is the only way to get things done. Just like there are managers that feel that when somebody makes a mistake, if they come at them really hard, it's going to create this sense of urgency in that person and make them rise up and be an excellent employee, when that is not usually the case.
So, my philosophy, and Robert can weigh in on this, is that if you hire well, right, that is part of your education on whether or not you need to actually micromanage someone. Yeah. And so again, what is it that you're trying to achieve, right? And I would say that what's most important is the self-awareness around this, and the sort of the symptoms, the things that are underneath the surface, looking at whether or not these are a factor in your micromanagement or if it's something else. And it may be again, it may there may be circumstances and it may be appropriate for you to micromanage some people. The point is that the best use of your time? And are you aware that you're doing it? Which for me is really the biggest thing. Are you aware that you're doing it? Is it intentional as opposed to you're doing it because of, and then we can get into the sort of these factors.
Sure.
And the factors that Howie Chan lays out, there are 6 of them, is fear, failure, lack of trust, inexperience, control issues, insecurity, and perfectionism. And in the end, it sort of boils down to probably the same thing, right? Which is um,
You somehow muted yourself.
there's a fear that other people can't do something. There is a fear that the person doesn't have experience or you don't have experience managing. And so you are micromanaging because you don't know another way. All right. Having control issues becomes something that has to be explored. Are you someone that has to always be in control? Right? Because you feel like if I don't do it, if I'm not the one, then no one else can do it. Is there insecurity that comes along with that? And then my favorite, perfectionism, because I'm a closet perfectionist. And so it's one of those things that I have learned to pay attention to. Right. So
Yeah.
those are the 6 sort of underlying causes that Howie Chan has laid out. And there are others. And so if you have some others that you're aware of, we would invite you to drop them in the comments.
What I think is interesting is,
What are you thinking, Robert?
well, as always, we kind of do these topics on the fly. We do sometimes meet and say, okay, we're going to work on this topic, but we don't really plan how we're going to engage when we have these conversations or when we do the show. And I did some quick research on this because I wanted to just double back. I looked at the infographic and I wanted to do some research, and I came up with only 5. But I think it's interesting because even though he has 6, it still makes sense. So I have fear, I have lack of trust. I see that on here. I see fear on here as well. Control, insecurity, and involvement. And that's the only different one. And of course, I don't have perfectionism on mine, but of course that makes a lot of sense. And I think that when we look at these, we may somehow, or try to, if you're a manager and you find that one of these 5 or 6 factors is involved in your management style, you may want to look at the reasons behind it. So I want to just go over that real quickly. So fear is really worrying about whether a mistake that your team make is going to somehow hurt your status or your department's status. And if that's going on there, then you certainly, it's a symptom of micromanaging. Lack of trust. This is usually what happens when you have a pace-setting leader or manager. This person usually came from the ranks, not all the times, but they're really good at that job that their team is doing, and maybe they got promoted because they were the best at doing their job, and they don't feel doing that job and feel that anybody else could come close to that level of excellence. So rather than growing their team, they want to step in and do it themselves. So they pace set. They want to say, this is how you do it. This is the only way to do it. If you deviate from this, there's going to be a problem. The thing that I find is interesting is there are some people who just need to control stuff. They feel that if they're not controlling, if they're not guiding things the way they think is best, then it's wrong. Of course, we know there are many different ways to do a plethora of tasks, and knowing how to do that and knowing the style of the people that you employ is also very important. Insecurity, basically what I found there is just that some people have a very low self-image. They have low self-esteem, and they feel that they have to get it in there. And the more that they control the team, that the more validation they have. And last, involvement. I want to connect this to pace setting, because a lot of people, they get involved because maybe they came from the ranks and now their people are doing the job that they used to do, and they were really good at it. And they're not really good at managing, but they want to get in there and still have that sense of excellence with their old job, so they can't help but go back and micromanage and steer people in the way that they want to do things.
Yes. Whether it's 5, 6, I like, the whole pace setting. And there certainly can be other reasons that people do what they do. I'm going to say again, taking the time to have some self-awareness around this becomes really important. So asking, right? Doing some reflection, some personal reflection, and asking questions about what it is you're doing. How are you managing your people? Ask your team, right? And ask your peers, right? So you can get a sense of how you are interacting with people, and whether or not the issues that are creating the micromanagement, if that is in fact what you're doing, if the issues that are creating that are one of these, and what you can then do in order to turn it around. And here's an interesting thing, and I've talked about this in trainings that I've had with managers, particularly more experienced managers, who are ones who will say, "Well, my employees need this." Right? The employee needs this. The employee requires this. And you can create a sort of a vicious cycle or circle around this, which is you micromanage. They begin to feel that they can't do anything right. And then it requires then you to continuously be there directing, overseeing, etc. And so it sort of becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy,
Yeah.
right? Rather than letting, what is it, taking your foot off the brake, so to speak, right? And giving people an opportunity. The other thing, and here's what came up when I was talking with a client the other day, is that it stemmed around sort of not having the right people in the right position. And sometimes, and I think this is what was being discussed in the webinar, is sometimes you may have a fantastic employee, but they're just not in the right role for them, right? Not doing the right thing for them. And therefore, because there's a mismatch, there's a job mismatch, that that they are not capable of doing the job that they are currently in. And so it feels like in order to get productivity out of them, you have to constantly be on top of them. And that starts to, it could do one of a couple of things, right? It can um, i- impede their self-esteem, their confidence, which sort of snowballs, and then it helps to sort of reinforce the lack of trust that someone can do the job. And then there's the whole, well, I could do this myself. I could do this quicker, faster myself, rather than delegating. And so it impacts a manager's ability to delegate, because if you come to a place where, and maybe it's not about control or perfectionism, it just is, the job needs to get done, it's not getting done. And it reinforces that thought that a lot of managers have, that it's just easier to do it myself than to turn it over, to explain, to train, to oversee, to hold accountable, etc., is just a better use of my time than to turn it over. And certainly, if it's an ongoing task, that probably is not true, right? It's probably not true if it's something that's going to be done over and over again. That may or may not be true for something that's a one-off.
Yeah, and it's really interesting. You say that. When I see those traits in clients, those are usually the same people that want to talk about time management and stress management, because they don't have time to do their assigned job because they're doing, they don't trust anybody else to do their job. And then because of that, they feel stressed out. This is not exclusively, but I see it a lot of times with clients that so starting to be able to delegate effectively is one of the first steps to actually getting more time, so you can actually reduce your stress and get your work done.
Yeah. Right. And we've done shows on that, on delegation. We've done shows on communication, right? And so some of the underlying problems are things that we've covered in terms of, if deciding what it is that you're trying to accomplish, right? And not only with getting the work done, but in your interactions with your employees, and taking the time to have regular sessions, feedback, your one-on-ones, your team meetings, providing feedback, letting people know where they are. That's not the same thing, which is the conversation I was having with the client. You laying out clear expectations of not only the task, but the quality, the level of quality that you're expecting. Right? I expect excellence. I expect that if you run into issues, that you will come to me, right? At the same time, you're creating an environment where your people feel comfortable coming to you because they have a problem, or don't understand what it is you're trying to do, right? Tying the pieces together so that people understand not only the task, but the importance of the task and how it fits in to what it is that they're there to do, right? And so all of this becomes part of the communication that happens. And when people understand the big picture, right, how things fit together, the contribution that they're making, and you've hired the right person, right? And there's a good fit, right? So it's all the pieces making with the assumption that you don't intentionally want to be a micromanager, right? All of this is sort of with an assumption that you are not setting out to intentionally be a micromanager. And I'm going to say this. I've not done a study. I don't know if there is a study out there, but I'm going to hazard to guess that the vast majority of managers would say they're not micromanagers. They don't want to be micromanagers. And to the degree that they are micromanagers, those that admit that they are probably far and few between. And then if you can get to those who admit it, they're probably going to place the blame elsewhere, right? And so again, what is it that you're trying to do, and how is it that you want to intentionally manage and lead your team, right? Which goes back to the importance of having a vision for how you want to lead, what to be the kind of leader that you want to be, taking the time to work on yourself, right? To in one of the, and this is probably in more than one, but certainly insecurity one, right, is working on personal professional development, right? Working on your self-confidence, working on your ability to trust, your ability to delegate. All that's why being a manager, being a leader, right? We say this all the time. It's simple, but it's not easy. It takes time, it takes effort, it takes intentionality on your part to be clear about what it is you want to do, and taking the time to develop yourself so that you can actually lead the way that you want to. There are, when the question is asked, are leaders born or developed,
Yeah.
created, right? I say the answer is yes. There's some people for whom this comes much more naturally, and then there are others who have to be very intentional and proactive in what they do in order to get the results that they want, in addition to getting the work done, right? And the results that you want, what are those? When I was managing a team in a corporate setting, not the way I manage the team now, but it's not all that different, was to stop and think, right? Do I want to have to spend all day, every day doing, overseeing people, or do I want to communicate with them, lay out expectations, have regular meetings, etc., so that I can do the work that's on my plate as well,
Yeah.
right? And that becomes the thing when you have your own work product that you need to deliver. Going back to Robert's point about time management, you don't have time to be doing other people's jobs.
But there are some people that they gauge their self-worth, or they gauge their value to an organization by how many hours they are actually working. And so they'll grab all that other stuff and then stay late and do their work, and they work 12 hours a day. But really, you don't need to do that, especially if you're developing your people. You should be delegating things to them. You should be giving them the support they need when they need it, and not, it's like, I don't want to denigrate any parenting, but it's almost like having a helicopter parent that's always hovering over their child, and of course, employees are not children, but I'm just using this as an analogy. Well, if you do that, the kids don't develop, and it's the same thing with employees. Employees don't develop. And then when it comes time for them to finally spread their wings, take on new assignments, a stretch assignment or something like that, they don't feel confident to do it because they haven't had the opportunity to grow in their role, because the manager has been pretty much, I don't want to say doing their job for them, not letting them express themselves and learn. And that is a problem in some organizations, and a problem that some managers have.
Absolutely. I just want to touch on the above the surface things in this infographic real quickly, right? So, what does it look like? How does the micromanaging manifest, right? And here are a couple of examples when you are asking to be copied on all emails that an employee sends, right? Or that you need to have a daily report of everything that's done. If you have someone on a performance improvement plan, maybe, right, this becomes something that, in order to see that they are doing the actual steps, process, working through, maybe this is appropriate. But in general, right, asking for copies of every single email, the going over things in detail, right? Asking for your employees to consult with you before making decisions. I'm going to give an example of when I was working retail a long time ago. And the evolution of my retail journey over a number of different, and I would say culinary as well, when I waited tables. um, th- there is a huge difference between training people to do the job, to ring up clothes, to take orders, deliver food, et cetera, right? And then giving them the ability to resolve problems. And I'm going to extrapolate this out even to my time when I worked for the Internal Revenue Service, and the level of satisfaction that I had in my job as I became more skilled in the work that I was doing in each of those retail, food service, and then the Internal Revenue Service. Um, as my skills became better, and I was given more autonomy, more power, and the ability to actually make decisions and resolve client, customer, taxpayer problems, right? As my level of autonomy increased, my job satisfaction increased, right? Because when you feel powerless and you can't do something for someone, it has a detrimental effect on you and sort of your self-esteem. And there comes a point in time where customers, clients, feel like the person that they're dealing with should have the ability to solve certainly simple problems, but even more complex issues. And so, when I first started retail, I didn't have any ability to like do refunds or void out transactions without a manager coming and having a part of that. Now, that wasn't micromanaging, but there was a distinct difference between how I felt when I was able to help the client, the customer in front of me, as opposed to saying, please wait, I need to go get a manager in order to do this thing, right? And when I was at the Internal Revenue Service, I started my job there on the phones. I was the taxpayer service representative. My job was to answer the phones. No job that I think I've ever had was worse than being at the Internal Revenue Service from, say, February 1st through May,
Yeah.
right? May, June,
You gave me
because people people don't call their Internal Revenue Service to say you guys are doing a great job.
Right.
They do not call for that,
Right.
right? They call because they have a problem. They call because they want their refund. They call because someone is saying that they owe money that they're claiming that they don't owe, that they already paid, et cetera, et cetera. When they call, they're already amped up. They're not happy. And they get you on the phone. And for you to say, I can't help you, right, it is disheartening, to say the
Right.
least. And so when I first started, in the first probably year or so, that was my job, right? And I worked through tax season, and it was very stressful. I eventually got, I'll call it a promotion, but I was elevated or promoted to what's called, at the time was called, the problems resolution department, right? And so I got additional training, and I was trained on how to actually go into the system and change things that allowed me to help taxpayers who were having problems, who had these problems going on for a period of time, right? They would get referred from the person on the phone, and it would work its way up, and I'm in this
Right.
department. I could actually do something to help people, and I actually enjoyed that aspect of my job, because I'm a problem solver, right? The sort of at my core, I'm a problem solver.
Right.
So it felt good to be able to do that. And then through some things that happened and deciding to go back to school, I ended up back on the phones. And after having had sort of that ability, it didn't work so well. Right. So I share that to say, right, when you let go, right, when you let go a little bit and you learn to, and trust takes time. I get it. Right. People don't come their first day on the job or the first day that you take over a department for someone else. That trust is not there. It takes time to build. But going back to what's your vision, right? Do you want a team of people that you can trust? Then you have to take actions and efforts that allow you to put people in a position where they can be trusted.
Absolutely.
And so, paying attention to what it is you're doing and how it's being received, why it is you're doing it, and then, when you're honest about why you're doing what you're doing, then you can start to work on the remedies that will allow you to address it so that you can stop the micromanagement. So whether it's about you or it's about having the wrong team members, outside of situations where the micromanagement is appropriate. And Robert, I don't remember you mentioning specifically what those were. You brought that up, so I'm going to leave that to you. And if you said it and I missed it, I apologize.
I did not say it. So micromanaging is appropriate in really two cases. When the organization is in dire trouble, right? They're in, the house is falling apart. There have been recalls. I'm just using these as examples. Maybe there has been, some quality control issues that have really hurt market share, things like that. Then it's okay to really scrutinize what people are doing until they get things back on track. The other circumstance where micromanaging is appropriate is if it is you work in a life or death industry where a mistake can cause people to lose their lives. Air traffic control, nuclear regulatory, things like that, surgeries. Then it's appropriate to micromanage, because you can't, if you're a brain surgeon, right, and you're training other brain surgeons, okay is not good enough. Right?
Right.
You want to make sure that they get it exactly right, excellently. So in those circumstances, micromanaging is certainly called for. However, most of us are not operating on people's brains. We don't work in nuclear regulatory. We're not air traffic controllers. Most of the mistakes that we make in management are not going to hurt people or collapse the entire company. But some people treat them as such.
That is very true. That is very true. So the question is, and this is for you to ask you, is what I'm doing micromanaging? Am I under some scenario where that is necessary, right? And do you want to continue, or do you want to find a different way? And so looking at what it is you're doing, and then why are you doing it, so that you can address what it is, right? If it is lack of trust, then it's about building trust. If there's a fear of failure, right, then what are you fearing really, right? If it's not one of those situations that's life or death, right? Is the fear of failure, is failure fatal? Right? If failure is not fatal, and for most situations failure is not fatal, right? Then And I think we've had an episode on this. If not, we've talked about it under other circumstances. Is that failure, right? If it's not fatal, is an opportunity to learn. It's an opportunity to grow. And creating environments where you allow people to do that helps with creativity, innovation, etc. And so your fear of failure creates fear of failure on your people. Their fear of failure doesn't allow them to be creative, innovative, and for you guys to grow. Right. So you have to look at the underlying symptom, what's underneath the surface. If it's one of these factors that we've talked about, and then taking the time to address it. So, Robert, any final thoughts as we wrap up?
No, I
This
think this is
episode.
I think this was quick and thorough. So I don't need to say anything else.
Awesome. Awesome. So again, the infographic is from Howie Chan. I found this on LinkedIn. If you want to see more of what Howie does, you can go and check that, check him out. Find the infographic online. I will maybe figure out a way, if I can figure out a way to share that online, I will. If someone is challenged with micromanaging, Robert,
How can they reach me?
how can they reach you so that they can turn that around?
Certainly, they can reach out to me at inspireme@roberthilliardcoaching.com, or they can just go to roberthilliardcoaching.com and fill out the contact form there. Let me know the challenges you're having or the goals that you have or trying to achieve, and we can set up a chemistry session, or some people call it a discovery session, and figure out whether or not we're a good match for each other.
Awesome. And if you want to reach out to me, you can do it at shiftingintooaction.now.site, shiftingintooaction.now.site, and you can book a session with me as well. So with that, we want to thank you again for joining us. We are here on Thursdays, and even when we're not here live, we're here, right? Usually there is an encore episode that we will run for you. So here, Thursdays, 3 p.m. Eastern, 12 noon Pacific, talking all things leadership, the state of leadership, simple and beyond. We want to thank you. If you're watching on YouTube, please like, subscribe, and share the episode. If you are here watching this on a replay on any of the platforms, YouTube, LinkedIn, or Facebook, let us know that you watched it on replay. So with that, again, thank you. And until next time, take care.
Bye now.